Let's
Yeah.
go. I said
One
one
day,
day.
I was thinking of the diagrams when I was reading. I'm like, come on, just go and create it. But
Right.
then I was reading. Anyway, hear me out. No, kidding.
Hello and welcome to the No One Asked You podcast. For this particular series, I am joined by my wonderful co-host, ThatDarnKitteh. Kitty and I are both going into this story completely new with almost no knowledge of the story or world.
Each segment, we intend to cover what happens in each new chapter and discuss our experience along the way. This is Mistborn Abridged, a blind read-through, and today we're covering chapter 8.
Yeah. So,
So, yes.
two things. One,
Mhm.
we need to have a quick conversation about Tin Eyes at the end of this episode. Don't let me forget.
Okay.
In a word, I felt this chapter was masterful. How about you, Kitty?
I loved it. Yeah. I want to know which bits you were what made you think masterful most. Hey. So I want to see what you're thinking of. I think it was really great. I enjoyed the POV changes. That was a good thing.
Yes.
But yeah, I suppose that's do we want to continue front loading? I suppose.
We'll get into it,
Mm,
but for now, let us do the epigraph.
a shorter one. But here you go. Go.
He shall defend their ways, yet shall violate them. He will be their savior, yet they shall call him heretic. His name shall be discord, yet they shall find love for him. Ooh.
Yeah. Okay. Here
That
it
sounds
comes.
like.
Hmm?
Go on.
It's the prophecy, the proper prophecy thing of like he's gonna
Totally.
cause cuck, but they'll love him. It's that the prophesied hero is not all good. It means big change and discord, but they'll still love him. So this made me think immediately of Kelsier. I'm sorry.
Really?
I know that this is not written about him because the epigraphs are. It's as if what I think is that it's as if the prophesied hero is whoever landed up being the Lord Ruler, and well, that's what the people that are writing the prophecies think, or something like that. That most people will think that yeah, he fulfilled the prophecies, whereas we had a bit of a discussion that maybe Vin or Calcia could be the actual iterations or embodiments of this prophecy, just come at a later date. And I thought of Calcia. He could
I
totally do that.
can totally see this as referring to Kelsier. Absolutely. His name shall be Discord, and they shall love him for it. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, it's just that it fits him. It's not that they're talking about Calcia. It's just that I'm like, from that premise of you that you brought up last week of like it could be Vin or Calcia, and the prophecy that yes, the Lord Ruler could have made this doctrine that the prophecy was about him and he fulfilled it and whatever, and even he was worried about not being the right person. But yeah, it could turn out that it fits. Okay, it'll be interesting. But it wasn't your first reaction. What was your first feeling?
It also potentially fits the Lord Ruler. If we assume that Epigraph Man is the Lord Ruler, and therefore the Lord Ruler is the hero, this doesn't necessarily mean that he failed. Like if it's part of the prophecy, if this is the prophecy and it's part of the prophecy that he will save the world, but people are gonna hate him, then that's prophecy fulfilled.
Yep, there you go. Yeah.
Which means it's entirely possible Lord Ruler's a good guy?
He's doing his best, okay?
Or he did the ultimate good. Hey, maybe there's a darn good reason that the Ska are enslaved.
Who knows? It'll be such a that's the thing. I like that that's up in the air. I know that things aren't as they seem. Also, just a note about the format of the epigraph. We've gone away from the diary entries, I suppose.
Yes,
the clear-cut diary sort of thing.
So this epigraph is a quote.
Because
it has the
In
Uh,
inverted commas. Yeah.
yes, whereas the others do not,
Mm-hmm.
which is interesting. But here's a question, all right? You're a person.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm a
You're a
person.
person who knows these prophecies. You know in your heart that Epigraph Man is the savior, the prophesied hero, and you know that people will call him a heretic and hate him. How do you, where am I going with this? Like, how do you reconcile in your mind this?
How
Never
do you
mind.
reconcile? No, how do you reconcile in your mind that he's still an ultimate good? Not ultimate, like ultimately good, not ultimate good.
Or that he's doing
Good.
good. Like,
Mm.
if you know for a fact that he is doing good, if you know for a fact that he is saving the world, I can understand not liking the person on an individual level, but
Mm-hmm.
to go out of your way to call him a heretic when you know that he will save the world, therefore whatever he is doing will be the correct course of action. But that's the trouble with prophecies in
Mm-hmm.
general, right?
Yeah, you have to accept that it's for the ultimate good. You have to accept that whatever the prophecy says is it's making sure that the good stuff happens. You're believing a premise already. You're believing that okay, this is how it could have gone if the prophecy was not fulfilled. You know what I'm saying? It could have gone. This is how we get out of here, kind of vibes. But yeah, the heretic bit interesting. Do they call him a heretic? I suppose in the beginning you could call, because we don't know we only hear little bits. We have every chapter we hear little bits of the Lord Ruler's like catechism, I suppose, because he is some sort of. It seems like a whole religion was based around him afterwards. The a heretic, I suppose, in the beginning they would be calling him a heretic, but then he decided, or he was able to dictate what is not heresy anymore. Do you know what I'm saying? He actually, you would call Calcier a heretic or something because he's against the church basically.
Yes.
Am I making sense? Yeah. So I like that it could be either or. Yeah.
Agreed. Well
Mhm.
done, Epigraph Man. Best of luck to you. So we get into chapter 8. We left on what is the opposite of a cliffhanger? We left on a wall jumper.
Yeah. She was not hanging on the cliff. She was in the air.
Vin shot into the air. She suppressed a scream, remembering to continue pushing despite her fear. The stone wall was a blur of motion, barely a few feet away from her. The ground disappeared below, and the line of blue pointing toward the ingot grew fainter and fainter.
What happens if it disappears?
She began to slow. The fainter the line grew, the more her speed decreased. After mere moments of flight, she crept to a halt and was left hanging in the air above a nearly invisible blue line. I've always liked the view from up here. Vin glanced to the side. Kelsier stood a short distance away. She had been so focused that she hadn't noticed that she was hovering a few feet from the top of the wall.
Help!
She said, continuing to push desperately lest she fall. The mists below her shifted and spun like some dark ocean of damned souls. You don't have to worry too much, Kelsier said. It's easier to balance in the air if you have a tripod of anchors, but you can do fine with a single anchor. Your body is used to balancing itself. Part of what you've been doing since you learned to walk transfers to allomancy. As long as you stay still, hanging at the very edge of your pushing ability, you'll be pretty stable. Your mind and body will correct any slight deviations from the base center of your anchor below, keeping you from falling to the sides. If you were to push on something else, though, or move too much to one side, well, you'd lose your anchor below and wouldn't be pushing directly up anymore. Then you'd have problems. You'd tip over like a lead weight on the top of a very tall pole.
Calcia.
I hope you aren't afraid of heights, Vin. That's quite a disadvantage for a Mistborn.
I'm not afraid of heights, but I'm also not accustomed to hanging in the air 100 feet above the bloody street.
Hey, we got Kitty acting instead of reading. Yay!
Yay.
Support. Do more.
Thank you. I'll
Of
try again.
course.
I'll try you know what? As Vin emotes more, I will learn to emote more. Okay.
Fair. Agreed. No going back. Kelsier chuckled, but Vin felt a forced tug against her belt, pulling her through the air toward him. He grabbed her and pulled her up over the stone railing, then set her down beside him. He reached an arm over the side of the wall. A second later, the ingot shot up from the air, scraping along the side of the wall until it flipped into his waiting hand. Good job. Now we go back down. And he throws the ingot over the other side of the wall.
We're really going outside? Outside the city walls? At night?
Kelsier smiled in that infuriating way of his. He walked over and climbed onto the battlements. Varying the strength with which you push or pull is difficult, but possible. It's better to simply fall a bit than push to slow yourself. Let go and fall some more, then push again. If you get the rhythm right, you'll reach the ground just fine.
Kelsier? I don't.
You're at the top of the city wall now, Vin. And he steps out into the air. He hangs hovering for a moment, balanced as he'd explained to her before. There are only two ways down. Either you jump off, or you try to explain to that guard patrol why a Mistborn needs to use their stairwell. Vin turned with concern, noting an approaching bob of lantern light in the dark mists. She turned back to Kelsier, but he was gone. She cursed, bending over the side of the wall and looking down into the mists. She could hear the guards behind her speaking softly to one another as they walked along the wall. She doesn't think she has many options, so she thinks to herself,
I hope Kelsier's out of the way.
She jumps and makes the plummet toward the ground. She pushed reflexively with her steel, but her trajectory was off. She had fallen to the side of the ingot, not directly toward it. Consequently, her push nudged her to the side even farther, and she began to tumble through the air. Alarmed, she pushed again, harder this time, flaring her steel. The sudden effort launched her back upward. She arced sideways through the air, popping up into the air alongside the wall top. The passing guards spun with surprise, but their faces soon became indistinct as Vin fell back down toward the ground. See, this is more of that funny Vin, right?
Really, I was just the visual of it. She's going like it's very epic. Okay, you're flying and falling and flying, whatever. But it's still so funny with the guards as well. It's a comical, like the guards, like huh.
Yeah.
And this sort of background humor, you know, that when something in the background, there's somebody screaming in the background, like yeah.
It's the Doppler effect.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I enjoyed this.
Me too. So she pulls on the ingot and tries to grab it and yank it toward her, and she thinks to herself,
I'm dead.
Then her body lurched, pulled upward by the belt. Her descent slowed until she was drifting quietly through the air. Kelsier appeared in the mist, standing on the ground beneath her. He was, of course, smiling. He let her drop the last few feet, catching her, then setting her upright on the soft earth. She stood quivering for a moment, breathing in terse, anxious breaths. Well, that was fun. Vin doesn't respond. Kelsier sat down on a nearby rock, obviously giving her time to gather her wits. Eventually, she burned pewter, using the sensation of solidness it provided to steady her nerves, which is, I think that's a pretty smart thing
Yeah,
to
go
do.
her. I was happy about that. I was like, because that is something that Calcius does, or like he does do little. He was doing little bursts of that sort of thing to have various effects, and she's already instinctively, I suppose, doing that.
Yeah.
Figuring out it does mean well, it does also make me think back to the kind of drug kind of way that people could end up using this stuff, but it makes sense. She's not misusing it. I don't think so. She's I'm just saying, like, you can see how that can get out of control.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
You did well.
I nearly died.
Everybody does their first time. Iron pulling and steel pushing are dangerous skills. You can impale yourself with a bit of metal that you pull into your own body. You can jump and leave your anchor too far behind. Or you can make a dozen other mistakes. My experience, limited though it is, has been that it's better to get into those extreme circumstances early when someone can watch over you. Anyway, I assume you can understand why it's important for an Allomancer to carry as little metal on their body as possible. Vin nodded, but then she reached up to her left ear.
My earring. I'll have to stop wearing it.
Does it have a clip on the back?
It's just a small stud, and the pin on the back bends down.
Then you'll be all right. Metal in your body, even if only a bit of it is in your body, can't be pushed or pulled. Otherwise, another Allomancer could rip the metals out of your stomach while you were burning them.
Good to know.
It's also why those Inquisitors can walk around so confidently with a pair of steel spikes sticking out of their heads. The metal pierces their bodies, so it can't be affected by another Allomancer. Keep the earring. It's small, so you won't be able to do much with it, but you could use it as a weapon in an emergency.
All right.
Now you ready to go? We're not going back up. Come on. Let's take a quick moment here to contemplate what it might mean that Allomancers cannot interact with metals inside the body. So there's no blood bending.
Did you like that?
I don't dislike it. I'm curious as to why that is the case.
It's a very magical thing, in my opinion. Like, were you thinking of what's the science behind that? What's the mechanism of that? And what are the limits of it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like when does it become somebody else's body, or when is a metal enough in someone's body?
Well, I'm curious if it's like a diegetic or non-diegetic reason. Did Brandon Sanderson just not want iron pulling and pushing to be OP, and therefore he said this is a limitation, or was there or did the Lord Ruler invent allomancy and decide that he didn't want it to be OP, so he created this limitation? Actually, now that I say that, there's no mention of allomancy in any of the epigraphs, is there?
No.
Like, I can't say for certain if the Lord Ruler actually did make allomancy or not, but that's an interesting thing that just stuck into my mind.
And I think what Calcia has suggested is that, okay, so the Lord Ruler like made it be believed that he created allomancy or gifted people with allomancy, but his alternative is, well, it could be that this was just a result of whatever cataclysm happened. Yeah, and then it wasn't actually him granting allomancy. It was just something from the deepness, I suppose. Not that he said the word deepness, but it was some other thing. Because also, Calcia does suggest that allomancy is more powerful, could be more powerful than the Lord Ruler.
Right. And the doctrine that the Inquisitors teach or whatever is that the Lord Ruler granted it to the nobles, not the Ska. There is that blood. I don't know. I look forward to
figuring it out.
Figuring it out. I don't know if there's much more to say on the topic. But it's
the OP-ness. The thing about the OP thing, it would be OP. I actually think I'm glad that there is a limitation like that, because then it just you get into the weeds, and you know what, this whole system becomes a bit too chaotic and gross as well. Doesn't Magneto do something where there's iron in somebody's blood or something?
Yes.
That's how he gets out of the prison and things like that. Like, damn, it's a bit much.
Yeah, it changes the dynamics, certainly.
Yeah, because and also with powers, it's another thing. You don't want things because you need to be very careful with the consequences of what powers you're creating. And it seems like in a lot of superhero movies and things like that, they kind of forget the consequences of certain powers being available. It's something that you really need to work. You need to draw those lines, and he did. So I'm happy with that. I'm like, cool, there it is. He's laid down the law that just and also I like that he mentioned the Steel Inquisitors, because it's like they count too. That's how they can walk around with those goddamn spikes in their heads. It makes sense. You're like, yeah, he didn't yank on the Steel Inquisitors eye things. He yanked on his emotion. Yeah.
Yes. And I certainly think that Brandon Sanderson has a tremendous love for making magic systems. I think that's very, very apparent in this book as he talks about all of these rules and what you can do and what you can't do, when to do it, when not to do it, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So that's neat.
I like that. It's very good to know that, yeah, you can't just rip the metals out of his stomach. That's a big deal. So I'm glad we can't do that. Thank you for covering that base, because somebody could say, oh, but like you need to make sure that that base is covered, that it's part of making your magic system a hard magic system. So people know this is why you can't do that. Not even why, it's just that you can't. I think that's fine.
Agreed.
And it's very magical. Like,
Yes.
oh, it's part of the person's body. So, ta-da, earring, just because you put this earring through your earlobe, it can't be pulled. That's quite cool. Or pushed. I think that's cool.
Yeah.
Also, one more thing about the earring as a weapon. So, like, I had this sort of thing of, like, like, I think it's Krav Maga or something where they use, like, there was an example of using, like, a popsicle stick or something to kill, because you use whatever's in front of you when you need a weapon. It wasn't a popsicle stick. It was actually, like, from a sucker, like a plastic thing. Anyway, so I'm just had a vision of Vin, like, using this to just, I don't know, pierce people's eyes and things. So,
could push it like a bullet. It clearly wouldn't weigh very much.
Yeah. So I was just thinking of that kind of thing. It's like, yeah, you could use it, like, in a pinch.
So the two of them are walking through the mist, and she thinks to herself,
so does he have a destination after all, or has he just decided to wander some more?
Oddly, his affable nonchalance made him very difficult to read. Vin hurried to keep up, not wanting to be left alone in the mists. The landscape around Luthadel was barren, save for the scrub and weeds. Prickles and dried leaves, both dusted with ash from an earlier ashfall, rubbed against her legs as they walked. The underbrush crunched under their feet, quiet and a bit sodden with mist dew. Occasionally, they passed heaps of ash that had been carted out of the city. Most of the time, ash was thrown into the river Channel, which passed through the city. Water broke it down eventually, or at least that was what Vin assumed. Otherwise, the entire continent would have been buried long ago. I'm getting a little bit of deja vu from that last paragraph, yeah?
Yeah, it's a repeat, but I'm okay with it. It's just like, yeah, it's part of the world. Repeated sort of things is fine.
Fair. Vin stayed close to Kelsier as they walked. Though she had traveled outside cities before, she had always moved as part of a group of boatmen, the ska workers who ran narrow boats and barges up and down the many canal routes in the Final Empire. It had been hard work. Most noblemen used ska instead of horses to pull the boats along the towpath, but there had been a certain freedom to knowing that she was traveling at all. Most ska, even ska thieves, never left their plantation or town. The constant movement from city to city had been Reen's choice. He had been obsessive about never getting locked down. He usually got them places on canal boats run by underground crews, never staying at one place for more than a year. He had kept moving, always going, as if running from something. That is the sentence right there, as if running from something.
Yeah, I was wondering whether you were going to stop there, because I was like,
Yeah, that. So I've already built up in my imagination, because I don't want to believe the worst of Reen. That the two of them must have been chased. Like, I imagine they knew she was I imagine that Reen and the mom knew she was a Mistborn, and so the two of them had to run to keep her alive. And then Reen left to get, like, the tail off of them. Does that make sense?
That. Yeah, and remember, the fact that he didn't mistreat her doesn't mean that's not that he just hates her or whatever. It's more like you could have this idea that he was being so harsh on her because he thought he had to be, and it doesn't make it right, doesn't make it healthy
to make
at
her
all.
Self-sufficient.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's twisted. It's not good. Okay, I'm not happy. We see how badly this affected her later on in this chapter. Actually, you also see a bit of Vin from Kelsier's perspective, and he's like, yeah, this is a really ruined child over here. Also, it seems like it's part of the underground to be this scared. That doesn't justify it, but it makes just making sense of Reen would help him. So I'm okay with that idea that, yeah, he cared, but he just didn't know how to care. He was just sickly in the way that he cared about her, and it was dysfunctional.
Yes. And I suspect that he was, like, very preoccupied with keeping her alive. And if that to him meant making her tough, so be it.
Yeah. He himself could be highly damaged as well. He's also part of this underworld and whatever, and he has beliefs about betrayal and all of that of his own. So he just wants her. If he believes that that's the way the world is, he wants her to believe it too. So he's going to be harsh to her. That I'm not justifying it, and I'm not happy that Reen is an asshole. But I want to understand why they were running, and yeah, because that is definitely a line that he wants us to notice. Okay, why would he put it there? No, it's there for a reason.
Yes, 100%. And I'm sure we will learn the actual secret and not what I have imagined in the future.
Yes.
But until then,
we will speculate.
yes. They continued to walk. At night, the barren hills and scrub-covered plains took on a forbidding air. Vin didn't speak, though she tried to make as little noise as possible. She had heard tales of what went abroad in the land at night, and the cover of the mists, even pierced by tin as it now was, made her feel as if she were being watched. The sensation grew more unnerving as they traveled. Soon she began to hear noises in the darkness. They were muffled and faint, crackling of weeds, shuffles in the enveloping mist.
He's just being paranoid,
she told herself as she jumped at some half-imagined sound, but eventually she could stand it no more.
Calcia! I think there's something out there. I think something's following us.
Oh, yes, you're right. It's a mist wraith.
Calcia! You mean they're real?
Of course they are. Where do you think all the stories came from? You want to go look at it?
Look at the mist wraith? Are you...
Mist wraiths might be a bit disturbing to look at, but they're relatively harmless. They're scavengers, mostly. Come on. He began to retrace their footsteps, waving her to follow. Reluctant but morbidly curious, Vin approached. Kelsier walked at a brisk pace, leading her to the top of a fairly scrub-free hill. He crouched down, motioning for Vin to do likewise. So first off, finally confirmation that the mists are real.
Mist wraiths are real, yeah, definitely. I was ready for that. I like that he goes, where do you think all the stories come from? Which is like, yes, that was my point, that people... there is a source for whatever story comes along. There's something. It might be silly. It might not be that substantial, although we find out it is. But they come from somewhere. People don't typically think. People don't make stuff up and then it stays without something sustaining that thought or that description. What did you think of Vin saying they're real? Like, I don't feel like she didn't believe it. It's just she wanted to believe they weren't real.
I mean, everything is rumor until you see it for yourself, right?
Yeah.
Like, Australia doesn't really exist, does it?
Oh yeah, no. It's just a story.
Yeah. And yet, for some reason, people keep insisting that it is real. So
yeah, it's weird.
Very. But no, I love the Mist Wraith and what we learn about them. Jesus. In this, they're really cool.
For me, this was one of a really good passage of writing. I was spellbound by it. I was like, oh, and I actually just went, holy shit. I was very disturbed by it. I'm sorry. You thought it sounds like you think it was very cool. I'm like, oh, so gross.
Yeah. Although I do think by the end of the chapter, I do rethink my prediction that Lord Renault is actually a Mist Wraith.
Yes, I did have that. I did want to ask you about that eventually, because the way I was influenced by your thinking of Mist Wraith. So I was like, oh, they can just be. This is not what I thought a Mist Wraith was.
Well, that's well. My prediction was informed by the rumors, and the rumors
that they can steal your face. Yeah,
that they can steal your face. So it seemed like a logical presumption at the time.
No, I'm not saying it's wrong. I think it made sense, and I was like, cool, let's go with that. It was just not, and I think that's what made this even more disturbing. I love the way it turned out. It's like, oh, we can see the connection between how this Mistwraith, how you can see how a Mistwraith could be said to steal someone's face. And let's get
Yes.
into it. I suppose if you haven't read this,
Okay,
enjoy.
yes, we'll do it, but just disclaimer for Kitty and anyone listening, my predictions are just that. Predictions.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
wasn't like, oh, Dorkus is wrong. Look at him.
I mean, I'm not trying to like trick you into thinking stuff fake news. I'm not trying to spread fake news. I'm telling you where my imagination goes.
Yes, and I went where your imagination went, because I didn't really even go to Mistwraiths. I really didn't, but it made so much sense to me when you brought that up. I was like, duh, and I went with you. So, and there's nothing wrong with that, because that made this even more enjoyable.
Cool.
Hmm.
Okay. Their hearing isn't very good, he said as she knelt in the rough ashen dirt beside him, but their sense of smell, or rather taste, is quite acute. It's probably following our trail, hoping that we'll discard something edible.
I can't see it.
There, Kelsier said, pointing toward a squat hill. Vin frowned, imagining a creature crouching atop the hill, watching her as she looked for it. Then the hill moved. Vin jumped slightly. The dark mound, perhaps 10 feet tall and twice as long, lurched forward in a strange, shuffling gait, and Vin leaned forward, trying to get a better look. Flare your tin. Vin nodded, calling upon a burst of extra allomantic power. Everything immediately became lighter, the mists becoming even less of an obstruction. What she saw caused her to shiver, fascinated, revolted, and more than a little disturbed. The creature had smoky, translucent skin, and Vin could see its bones. It had dozens upon dozens of limbs, and each one looked as if it had come from a different animal. There were human hands, bovine hooves, canine haunches, and others she couldn't identify. Have you played Dark Souls, Kitteh?
No.
You have
Sorry.
not. Kitty, you should look up Nito from Dark Souls. That's very much what I imagine the Mistwraiths look like.
Okay, hold
Do
on.
it. Do it. Nito.
Nito. Ah! It works, but it's got a sword. It's so disturbing. Oh yeah, that works. Like you don't need the sword to be that disturbing. Don't worry, you don't need this bigger.
Yeah, Gravelord Nito. It's creepy.
Oh god, I hate it. Thanks, and
So-
it's massive.
Thanks, I hate it. So that is very much what I had in my mind.
I was already disturbed. I knew that I could go and look it up as well, but I haven't looked up fan art or anything like that of this, because
Neither have I.
it was disturbing in my mind already. But I can do it now. So yeah.
Cool.
Let's see what it is. Ah! AI, they got the AI generation of it. Oh, it's so disturbing. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. Oh, this one in Bloodborne.
Oh, I could totally see something like it coming out of Bloodborne.
One reborn from Bloodborne. That's what this is. Oh, I feel sick. I feel it's good. Yeah, it's well done. Oh,
yeah. Oh yeah, that's the. Well, I'm gonna try to keep this PG for a moment, but I remember that boss.
Oh, it's so horrible. Oh, I hate it. It's such a great idea, and it's so disturbing, and it just made what it made me think of as well was this would be an amazing anime. I would want to see this in anime form, because you can make it so disturbing in anime. There's a Lego second brick Lego fan art, and this person puts. Oh my gosh! I need to send this to you. This is so cute.
Do it. Do it.
This person does Lego art of the scenes.
Oh, this is cool. But yeah. I would much rather. Oh, this is so cool. Oh, that's the blue lines too. Oh,
Yeah.
Oh wow. Oh, that's cool. That's so
And
cool.
look at it. Oh, and look, the next one is the Mistwraith. He made a Lego Mistwraith.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool. All the heads and yeah, I love it.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I would much rather see a cartoon or anime
Mhm.
Mistborn than live action because
Same. Mm.
and I credit Vin's physical humor for that.
Yes.
Just because she is so animated in her responses.
Yeah, you could do a lot with it. And just the magic is so much easier. You know, I feel like magic is it's really well done in anime. It's easier to really appreciate it in anime. That's what I think. But and also you can anime can go on forever. So
True.
you can actually take time to do a book adaptation properly.
Very true.
Okay, I'm getting lost in the Lego fan stuff.
Yes. Okay, let's get back to the book. The mismatched limbs let the creature walk, though it was more of a shamble. It crawled along slowly, moving like an awkward centipede. Many of the limbs, in fact, didn't look functional. They jutted out from the creature's flesh in a twisted, unnatural fashion. Its body was bulbous and elongated. It wasn't just a blob, though. There was a strange logic to its form. It had a distinct skeletal structure, and squinting through tin-enhanced eyes, she thought she could make out translucent muscles and sinew wrapping the bones. The creature flexed odd jumbles of muscles as it moved and appeared to have a dozen different rib cages along the main body. Arms and legs hung at unnerving angles. And heads, she counted 6. Despite the translucent skin, she could make out a horse head sitting beside that of a deer. Another head turned toward her, and she could see its human skull. The head sat atop a long spinal cord attached to some kind of animal torso, which was in turn attached to a jumble of strange bones.
What? Ow!
Mistwraiths have malleable bodies. They can shape their skin around any skeletal structure and can recreate muscles and organs if they have a model to mimic.
You mean
When they find a corpse, they envelop it and slowly digest the muscles and organs. Then they use what they've eaten as a pattern, creating an exact duplicate of the dead creature. They rearrange the parts a little bit, excreting the bones they don't want while adding the ones they do want for their body, forming a jumble like what you see out there. Vin watched the creature shamble across the field, following her tracks. A flap of slimy skin drooped from its underbelly, trailing along the ground.
it's Sammy Snail? Sorry.
It's Sammy Snail.
No, it's not. Sorry. Okay, she got okay. Tasting for scents, following the smell of our passing.
Is it weird that I kind of want Vin to like pet it or offer it food?
that is definitely odd because I am just so like so disturbed by this. I don't want Vin near it. I'm feeling as
No, you gotta
I'm
you gotta
feeling as weird as
domesticate
her.
it.
You just want to make friends. You want to go and pet the horse head.
Yes.
Here's an apple. Here you go. You're like, oh god. Yeah, I am here, like I am learning from Calcia. It's fine. It's not it's not it's harmless kind of. Oh, thank you airplanes for also letting
Yeah.
us know. Although when you were reading a bit of the passage, there was also like a dog barking in the background, and I didn't stop you because it was so creepy.
It's fine. It's fine. But we
Oh,
will
anyway, yeah. No, Mistwraiths aren't pets, okay? Well, I do think they are. Let's get into it, actually.
pet Mistwraiths. No, look, get an army of Mistwraiths to attack the city. That is the plan.
They're not going to attack. They're just going to just shamble along. And also, like, how does it choose what it puts in its body? It's just like, oh, I don't like that limb.
Right. What is?
That limb out.
I'm so curious why it would choose one limb over another.
It's like, no. And we figure out like it doesn't have it's got just instincts, so that its instincts make it discard certain limbs and things.
Yes.
and yeah, it's got a slimy sort of tongue thing, and well, like flap of skin that tastes the ground. Ugh!
A lot of
What else?
ash on that ground.
Yeah, he's just like, oh, it's ash. Oh wait, there's some human skin. Mm. And also this digestion thing makes me think. So look, you can see the skull, but if the person had, I mean, if they were, it just found a fresh corpse or whatever, it's gonna have that person's face. So, that's a bit
Yeah.
scary. You're gonna see that person in there. You're gonna see that corpse in there. And also, I want to know how they attack, because he does say, okay, let's get there.
Yes, so Vin asks questions.
Are they intelligent then? If they can split up a body and put the pieces where they want?
Intelligent? No, not one this young. More instinctual than intelligent.
Do people know about these things? I mean, other than the legends?
What do you mean by people? A lot of Allomancers know about them, and I'm sure the Ministry does. Ordinary people, well, they simply don't go out at night. Most scoff fear and curse mistwraiths, but go their entire lives without actually seeing one.
Lucky for them. Why doesn't someone do something about these things?
They're not that dangerous.
That one has a human head.
Probably found a corpse. I've never heard of a mistwraith attacking a full-grown healthy adult. That's probably why everybody leaves them alone. And of course, the high nobility have devised their own uses for the creatures. Fighting pits, I bet.
Oh yeah, just keep them in the garden. And also that they clean up whatever dead stuff you got there, I suppose. But yeah, and also like, okay, wait, they do attack children, I suppose. That implies they attack children.
They could, I
Heard
suppose.
I've never heard of a mistwraith attacking a full-grown healthy adult.
Okay, but what are kids gonna be doing out in the mist? Let's be honest.
But I did think, I was like, okay, so it's just gonna, and also, how does it attack? It just absorbs. Does it hit you and then absorb, like, or is its form of attack just swallowing you, kind of?
I bet it like uses bones to just like beat you.
Yeah. Ugh.
Vin looked at him questioningly, but he said no more, rising and walking down the hillside. She shot one more glance at the unnatural creature, then took off, following Kelsier.
Is that what you brought me out here to see?
Mistwraiths might look eerie, but they're hardly worth such a long trip. No, we're heading over there. She followed his gesture and was able to make out a change in the landscape ahead.
The Imperial High Road? We've circled around to the front of the city.
Kelsier nodded. After a short walk, during which Vin glanced backward no less than 3 times to make certain the Mistwraith hadn't gained on them, they left the scrub and stepped onto the flat, packed earth of the Imperial High Road. Kelsier paused, scanning the road in either direction. Vin frowned, wondering what he was doing. Then she saw the carriage. It was parked by the side of the high road, and Vin could see that there was a man waiting beside it. "Oh, Sazed," Kelsier said, walking forward. The man bowed. "Master Kelsier," he said, his smooth voice carrying well in the night. It had a higher pitch to it than... Oh, shit, okay. "Master Kelsier," he said, his smooth voice carrying well in the night air. It had a higher pitch to it, and he spoke with an almost melodic accent. "I almost thought that you had decided not to come." "You know me, Saz," Kelsier said jovially, slapping the man on the shoulder. "I'm the soul of punctuality." He turned and waved a hand toward Vin. "This apprehensive little creature is Vin." "Ah, yes," Sazed said, speaking in a slow, well-enunciated way. There was something strange about his accent. Vin approached cautiously, studying the man. Sazed had a long, flat face and a willowy body. He was even taller than Kelsier, tall enough to be a bit abnormal, and his arms were unusually long.
"You're a terraceman,"
Vin said. His earlobes had been stretched out, and the ears contained studs that ran around their perimeter. He wore the lavish, colorful robes of a terrace steward. The garments were made of embroidered, overlapping V-shapes, alternating among the 3 colors of his master's house. "Yes, child," Sazed said, bowing. "Have you known many of my people?"
"None, but I know that the high nobility prefer terraceman stewards and attendants."
"Indeed they do, child." He turns to Kelsier. We should go, Master Kelsier. It is late and we are still an hour away from Felice.
Felice. So we're going to see the imposter, Lord Renew.
Vin thought. Sazed opened the carriage door for them, then closed it after they climbed in. Vin settled on one of the plush seats as she heard Sazed climb atop the vehicle and set the horses in motion. And that ends the first POV of this chapter.
Mm-hmm.
And
what do you think of the terraceman?
he
so
seems
far?
cool.
Mm-hmm.
Mysterious for the moment. He seems very foreign, but slick. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I'm quite surprised by how different he is physically. In terms of literally, he's much taller and has long limbs. Like there's an actual.
Now, do you think that's just Sazed, or do you think that's all Terracemen?
That's Terraceman, because she looked at his limbs and all of that, and then said he was a Terraceman. So, like, and she had never seen one before, but she knew that. Oh, so she's heard about them, and this is what they're supposedly they seem like. So, I mean, and the earlobes and all of that. So it's very cool, a cool introduction. I just thought they were just larger people. That's all, or like
Cool.
stronger people from the epigraph discussion. Also, I didn't really know that Terracemen were still a thing. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Did you?
I
Hadn't
kind of, I mean, I assumed Terrace was still there. I don't know that we call it Terrace anymore. That was an interesting thing, because we know there was a line about people knowing what the land was called before. So it's interesting that it's still called Terrace. It's interesting that Terracemen are prized servants.
Yes, and they didn't like. Yes, the way that we had seen Terracemen is they were Sherpas basically, and just carried stuff. But they had a bit of defiance against the epigraph man. The one guy,
or at least one individual did.
Yeah, one individual did. Yeah, so that's quite interesting. It would be interesting to figure out what happened. What their role, how their role turned into this sort of loyal servant thing. Anyway.
Yes. So I said that I had called this chapter masterful.
Mm-hmm.
So this was our first portion of it, and the Mistwraith stuff was just so cool. And we finally got some concrete answers on what they are.
Mm-hmm.
So that was step one. Now, the last episode, and I think several episodes before that, I had lamented wanting Kelsier and Vin to have certain conversations.
Yes.
And I had lamented that I wanted Kelsier and Vin to say very specific things to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And we get that this chapter. And that is why I say
masterful. Yeah, because I was like, oh, did Dorkus read ahead? Because this is too on the nose. So you just, because when I did get it, I'm like, yay, we did get it.
I swear I have not read ahead. Except
That's
for
cool.
looking in the back to see what a tin eye was, because I was listening. Okay, we'll have the tin eye discussion now.
Yeah, okay.
I was listening to the chapter that aired at the time of recording, aired last Sunday. And I totally realized how I was not listening well to what you were saying, and I apologize for that. And I was so focused on this idea of the blue lines allowing you to see metals and associating the word eye with sight. But you're right. It would be more appropriate for tin. So I looked at the glossary in the back to look up specifically what a tin eye is, because it has not definitively been explained. And a tin eye is someone who can essentially cast haste on themselves, which is enhance their senses. Frankly, I like the sight thing better, but
what? Well,
it is what it is.
Like, because I don't know, just the being able to see the lines is like, you can't really do much.
I think there could have been a better word for casting haste than tin eye.
Oh yeah.
If you're gonna use the word eye, use it for the thing that lets you visually see metal.
Yes. No, so you were just confused by the word. Like, I wasn't that crazy about using the thing tin eye. It's just if they focus on one one sense when it enhances all your senses. So yeah.
Right. So like, why would you limit it specifically to eyesight? These are
Now see what
nitpicks.
happens.
Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
it was super cringe for me to listen to that episode and know I was wrong.
I was just, I was like, oh well, I suppose we'll figure it out. We'll get more clarity as we go on. And then when Dorkus told me, he's like, yeah, actually, you were right about the Tanai thing, and I was like, oh cool, I'm just so happy that I got something, and I was, like I actually clearly saw something.
Now you have such incredible insight. And you've made me think of things that I wouldn't otherwise. I didn't make the Kelsier association in the Terrace prophecy that we read today. So that was incredible. Statement of appreciation. Yeah.
Statement of appreciation to you too.
Now let's get back to the chapter. From Kelsier's POV. Kelsier sat quietly in their carriage. The window shades were closed against the mist, and a small lantern, half shielded, hung in the corner. Vin rode on the seat directly across from him, her legs tucked up underneath her, her enveloping mist cloak pulled close, hiding her arms and legs. She always does that, Kelsier thought. Wherever she is, she tries to be as small and unnoticeable as possible. So tense. Vin didn't sit, she crouched. She didn't walk, she prowled. Even when she was sitting in the open, she seemed to be trying to hide. She's a brave one, though. During his own training, Kelsier hadn't been quite so willing to throw himself off a city wall. Old Gemmel had been forced to push him. Vin watched him with those quiet, dark eyes of hers. When she noticed his attention, she glanced away, huddling down a little more within her cloak. Unexpectedly, however, she spoke.
Your brother, you two don't get along very well.
No, we never really have. It's a shame. We should, but we just don't.
He's older than you?
Kelsier nodded.
Did he beat you often?
Beat me? No, he didn't beat me at all.
You stopped him then. Maybe that's why he doesn't like you. How did you escape? Did you run, or were you just stronger than him?
Vin, Marsh never tried to beat me. We argued, true, but we never really wanted to hurt one another. Vin didn't contradict him, but he could see in her eyes that she didn't believe him. Oh!
Well, what did you feel about this? Because it's yeah.
Honestly, my first thought was of you writing "wow" in the margin, and then I was like transported to this moment right here, right now, where I expected you to say "wow."
Wow, yes. I was just too busy in being invested in what I wanted to see what you thought. Because I was just like, geez, Vin, wow. Okay, yeah. You
just this assumption that siblings try to
this is normal.
do that.
And it's so nice, like it's innocent. And it's just it's a bit like you could say, oh, that's a bit much, like of course. But she really has not been exposed to anything healthy. This is really what is normal in her head. And he's doing that on purpose. He's showing us how twisted her perspective on life is. And that's why Kelsier says, what a life.
What a life, Kelsier thought, falling silent. There were so many children like Vin in the underground, though most died before reaching her age. Kelsier had been one of the lucky ones. His mother had been a resourceful mistress of a high nobleman, a clever woman who had managed to hide the fact that she was scoffed from her lord. Kelsier and Marsh had grown up privileged, considered illegitimate, but still noble, until their father had finally discovered the truth.
Aha! Okay, so before we get into the juicy things over there that come next, I had to stop you.
Sure.
We get some more background of what's her name, Kelsier and Marsh's upbringing. I thought they were underground kids, like I thought they were poorer. I didn't think that I thought they came into their money as thieves.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I hadn't fully thought about it all that much, but as I read it, it was like, yeah, that makes sense. If Kelsier has refined tastes and a taste for the finer things, it's entirely possible he grew up like that. So why not?
And also it brings us back to that where we were like, there really isn't that much of a difference between Scar and noble people, noble women, noble men. There's no actual way of telling. except you can say, oh, allomancers, I suppose. You have some allomancy. That's cool. But even then, you can still fool people. It's just that there is a risk, and the mom took the risk and did it pretty well for quite a long time, it seems.
Yeah, impressive.
Mm.
She must have been an amazing woman to be able to do that.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Now, cooler things.
Yes.
The conversation happens. Okay. Why did you teach me those things? About allomancy, I mean.
I promised you that I would.
Now that I know your secrets, what is to keep me from running away from you?
Nothing. Once again, her distrusting glare told him that she didn't believe his answer.
There are metals you didn't tell me about. Back in our meeting on the first day, you said there were 10.
There are. But I didn't leave the last 2 out because I wanted to keep things from you. They're just difficult to get used to. It will be easier if you practice with the basic metals first. However, if you want to know about the final 2, I can teach you once we arrive in Felice. So that's an important thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can only learn so much at once. You can't mind meld all of the information.
Yeah, and these other two metals, they do seem to be quite different and maybe dangerous in a different way. So that makes me more excited to learn about them. But yeah, it goes back to what we already thought in the previous chapters, that he's keeping that because it's better and safer for her to learn in this order. It has nothing to do with manipulation.
And she was so impatient with the blue line allomancy that she nearly impaled herself.
Yeah.
So,
but he did expect, he's like, oh, I should have expected you to do that. But I mean, look,
yes.
but that doesn't mean...
I don't expect her to be a perfect student by any means, but she's just so quick to assume that it's not because there's a lesson plan or dangers in learning everything all at once. It must be because of the power dynamic that she perceives.
And she even says, now that I know your secrets. Like, no, God, it's not really a secret. But okay,
Right.
she's immediately decided there's secrets. I know your secrets now. Because, like, relax, okay? He wasn't holding these things back.
Yeah.
It looks very comical, actually. Just the way she's speaking here. You're like, yeah, you're saying it out loud now. And this is how paranoid she is. And I like that Kelsier just rolls his eyes, and he does oh God, they needed this conversation. I'm so glad that we got it.
So much, yeah. And Kelsier, Vin's eyes narrowed. Kelsier rolled his eyes. I'm not trying to trick you, Vin. People serve on my crews because they want to, and I'm effective because... Wait, hold on a sec. I forgot to ask. Or dare I ask, how does the audiobook do Sazed's voice?
Not too much of an accent, just a smoother sort of way of speaking.
Okay, cool. Totally not comparing myself at all. Vin's eyes narrowed. Kelsier rolled his eyes. I'm not trying to trick you, Vin. People serve on my crews because they want to, and I'm effective because they can rely on one another. No distrust, no betrayals.
Except one, the betrayal that sent you to the pits.
Kelsier froze. Where did you hear that? Vin shrugged. Kelsier sighed, rubbing his forehead with one hand. Oh, he's getting frustrated now. That wasn't what he wanted to do. He wanted to scratch his scars, the ones that ran all along his fingers and hands, twisting up his arms toward his shoulders. He resisted. That isn't something worth talking about.
But there was a traitor.
We don't know for certain. That sounded weak even to him. Regardless, my crews rely on trust. That means no coercions. If you want out, we can go back to Luthadel right now. I'll show you the last 2 medals, then you can be on your way. And I'm so glad that he said this, because we had had a whole conversation about whether or not Vin could meaningfully consent to the plan, to being a part of the heist, given that she thought that he was effectively forcing her to say yes in exchange for lessons. So now she finally, in my opinion, gets to make that informed decision. That made me really, really happy.
Yeah, in spite of whatever she's trying to, she's kind of has disbelief that this is still, she's not like comfortable with it, but she is really getting the choice now. It's very much so, because also he's saying, fine, I'll teach you about those metals. Cool. And you can go. Try me. I'm glad we got that. Yeah, I'm glad that he even basically makes sure that they turn the carriage around.
Yes. But Vin says,
I don't have enough money to survive on my own.
Kelsier reached inside his cloak and pulled out a bag of coins, then tossed it on the seat beside her. 3,000 boxings. The money I took from Kamen. Now, technically, it would be a bit less than 3,000 because he gave some of that to Milev. Just saying. Just saying.
He topped it up.
Vin glanced at the bag distrustfully. Take it. You're the one who earned it. From what I've been able to gather, your allomancy was behind most of Kamen's recent successes, and you were the one who risked pushing the emotions of an obligator. Vin didn't move. Fine, Kelsier thought, reaching up and knocking on the underside of the coachman's chair. The carriage stopped, and Sazed soon appeared at his window. Turn the carriage around, please, Saz. Take us back to Luthadel. Yes, Master Kelsier. Within moments, the carriage was rolling back in the direction it had come. Vin watched in silence, but she seemed a little less certain of herself. She eyed the bag of coins. I'm serious, Vin. I can't have someone on my team who doesn't want to work with me. Turning you away isn't a punishment. It's just the way things must be. Vin didn't respond.
I am very happy he said turning you away isn't a punishment. I'm so happy that he's saying that. It's not punishment, okay? This is literally, you haven't done anything wrong here. It's just, okay, well, you don't want to be here. That's it.
Yeah.
Oh.
This conversation and the one in the next POV, it's very much like he knows exactly what needs to be said. It is so good. And they both say everything I really wanted them to say.
And she asks what you want her to ask, yeah.
Yeah. Vin didn't respond. Letting her go would be a gamble, but forcing her to stay would be a bigger one. Kelsier sat trying to read her, trying to understand her. Would she betray them to the Final Empire if she left? He thought not. She wasn't a bad person. She simply believed that everybody else was. Oh, well.
That was a boom line. That was a boom line. Yeah. It's like, yep, that's exactly it. Thank you.
Yep.
I think your plan is crazy.
So do half the people on the crew.
You can't defeat the Final Empire.
We don't have to. We only have to get Yedin an army, then seize the palace.
The Lord Ruler will stop you. You can't beat him. He's immortal.
We have the 11th medal. We'll find a way to kill him.
The ministry is too powerful. They'll find your army and destroy it.
Kelsier leaned forward, looking Vin in the eye. You trusted me enough to jump off the top of the wall, and I caught you. You're going to have to trust me this time, too. She obviously didn't like the word trust very much. She studied him in the weak lantern light, remaining quiet long enough that the silence grew uncomfortable. Finally, she snatched the bag of coins, quickly hiding it beneath her cloak.
I'll stay, but not because I trust you.
Why then?
Because I want to see what happens.
Oh, so cool. Excellent way to end that POV.
Yeah, it's such a good interaction because, and I like that he asks why. It's like, well, okay. Like she won't, we know she doesn't trust him, so it's fine that she's just like, nah, not because we trust you. And it is, she does have curiosity. And what do you think of her just bringing out all of these? She's telling him, what she thinks of the plan, which is not news to him, but she feels the need to tell him these things. It's kind of like she's challenging him.
Oh yeah, and taking the boxings even though she's staying. Yeah.
Yeah. She's like, fine, I'll keep this. Yeah.
Yeah. She very much seems to be transitioning like into a person in these moments.
Person, yeah. No, she is. She really is. We're getting more of a sense of who she can be when she's given freedom. She's not afraid of everything, of being anything. She's given the space to exist as opposed to shrinking all over the place, which is what she's been trying to do. Shrinking all over the place, really, Jinxia? Okay, whatever. I mean, like shrinking. Okay.
Yeah, she's not acted as if she's had very much autonomy, and here she seems to be exercising some.
Yeah, and she is curious. I believe she is curious she wants to see what would happen, and the reason she also brings up all those those technicalities that could end in their doom, I suppose. Doing that is like, it's kind of like, well, what you gonna do about I'm saying things that shouldn't like. What are you gonna do? And it's like, yeah, I've
it's
got the answers.
and it's also very much like Kelsier had said in an earlier chapter. People are attracted to vision, and
she
wouldn't
is.
you want to see what happens?
Yeah. Wow. But she takes the boxing. So I like that she did that too.
Yeah.
Because she doesn't trust him still, but
No.
she's taking a risk, and it is good that he does make it like real. Listen, you jumped off a wall and just trusted that it would be okay. So you've already taken the risk. Do this. So I really enjoyed that. Thank God they had that. Thank God. Thank the Lord Ruler they had that conversation.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. And then we return to Vin's POV. Having a keep in Luthadel qualified a house for high noble status. However, having a keep didn't mean that one had to live in it, especially not all the time. Many families also maintained a residence in one of Luthadel's outskirt cities. Less crowded, cleaner, and less strict in its observance of imperial laws, Felice was a rich town. Rather than containing imposing buttressed keeps, it was filled with lavish manors and villas. Trees even lined some of the streets. Most of them were aspens, whose bone-white bark was somehow resistant to the discoloring of the ash. Vin watched the mist-cloaked city through her window, the carriage lantern extinguished at her request. Burning tin, she was able to study the neatly organized and well-groomed streets. This was a section of Felice she had rarely seen. Despite the town's opulence, its slums were remarkably similar to the ones in every other city. So, quick note. So if the lanterns were extinguished and she's burning tin to see well, is Sazed doing the same thing? How does he see without the lanterns?
Yeah, I was thinking of that. I was wondering whether he's got any sort of skills. That
Any
was
racial bonuses? Any
yeah.
passive abilities?
I mean, he's got the height and the long arms. Okay, so yeah, it does make sense. And
so he's
it would
got a
be
5-foot. He's got a 10-foot reach. Cool.
yeah, cool.
When wielding a martial weapon, I'm making D&D jokes.
I'm getting them.
Cool. Oh man.
And she wanted the lanterns extinguished. What, so she could study nicely? I mean, she wants, yeah, because she's burning tin. She wants to just have a look, I suppose. That's normal.
See, now I had assumed it's because she didn't want to be seen, but it could be that she wanted to practice the tin.
No, I think it's not practice. I think it's she doesn't want to be seen, but she wants to observe. It's natural to her to not be seen and observe. And she was uncomfortable with the lights. Yeah, I think you're right. She doesn't want to be seen. She wants to just have a look because she is paranoid, and we're okay with that. Yeah. We understand.
Kelsier watched the city through his own window, frowning.
You disapprove of the waste. You see the riches of the city and think of the Scar who worked to create it.
That's part of it. There's more, though. Considering the amount of money spent on it, this city should be beautiful.
It is.
The homes are still stained black. The soil is still arid and lifeless. The trees still grow leaves that are brown.
Of course they're brown. What else would they be?
Green. Everything should be green.
Green? What a strange thought.
She tried to imagine trees with green leaves, but the image seemed silly. Kelsier certainly had his quirks, though. Anyone who had spent so long at the pits of Hathson was bound to be left a bit strange. I liked that passage.
Yeah, I liked it too. I liked the world building of it as well. Yeah.
I thought of The Giver.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with The Giver?
Yes, it's been a while. I haven't read it. It was a book, hey, but I watched the movie.
Yes, I think if I recall it correctly, everyone sees everything in black and white, and then the main character eventually starts to get to see in color, and he's just like enamored, like with the redness of an apple. So, and I'm just appreciating color in this moment and the world building of this perspective of not believe of the idea of a tree being green as being so foreign.
Yeah, it's so silly. It's like she explains it away, and she thinks, oh well, yeah, he's a bit strange, isn't he? Like, that's how enduring this ash and whatever it is. It's completely unthinkable that they would be green.
Yeah,
which is so sad.
And we did get a brief description in a previous chapter about carefully cultivated plants in a greenhouse.
Mm-hmm.
So just, it's nice. It's neat. I appreciate
Mm-hmm.
it.
Yeah.
He turned back toward her. Before I forget, there are a couple more things you should know about allomancy. First, remember to burn away any unused metals you have inside you at the end of the night. Some of the metals we use can be poisonous if digested. It's best not to sleep with them in your stomach. I
All
like
right.
that. It's a bit
Yeah.
of more information on what is physically happening. So you're not digesting. Yeah, you are actively using it. We understand why you can't like stockpile, and possibly why it's probably best not to overload on it. Like if you have like 48 hours worth of tin to burn, you're going to have to stay up for 48 hours burning it or constantly flaring it, which will tear you apart, apparently, whatever that means. So it makes sense that you have to be careful about how much you ingest.
Yeah. Glad he told her about this, because I suppose this is the first time she has a good amount in her as well, I suppose.
Yes.
Thank you for not forgetting, because that seems quite important.
And Vin says,
all right.
Also, never try to burn a metal that isn't one of the 10. I warned you that impure metals and alloys can make you sick. Well, if you try to burn a metal that isn't elementically sound at all, it could be deadly.
Good to know,
she thought. Ah, here we are. The newly purchased Mansion Renault. You should probably take off your cloak. The people here are loyal to us, but it always pays to be careful. Vin agreed completely. She pulled off the cloak, letting Kelsier tuck it in his pack. Then she peeked out the carriage window, peering through the mists at the approaching manor. The grounds had a low stone wall and an iron gate. A pair of guards opened the way as Sazed identified himself. The roadway inside was lined with aspens, and atop the hill ahead, Vin could see a large manor house, phantom light spilling from its windows. Sazed pulled the carriage up before the manor, then handed the reins to a servant and climbed down. Welcome to Mansion Renault, Mistress
Manor.
Vin. Yeah, God damn it. Says Mansion Renault.
Oh, it says manor. In my book, it says manor.
Really? Mine totally says mansion. I have to send you a picture. Hold on.
I believe you. We have different editions.
Fair. Okay, fine. Folks.
Do you believe me? It says manor.
I totally believe you. Okay. Welcome to Mansion Renault, Mistress Vin, he said, opening the door and gesturing to help her down. Vin eyed his hand, but didn't take it, instead scrambling down on her own. The terraceman didn't seem offended by her refusal. The steps to the manor house were lit by a double line of lantern poles. As Kelsier hopped from the carriage, Vin could see a group of men gathering at the top of the white marble stairs. Kelsier climbed the steps with a springy stride. Vin followed behind, noticing how clean the steps were. They would have to be scrubbed regularly to keep the ash from staining them. Did the Ska who maintained the buildings know that their master was an imposter? How was Kelsier's benevolent plan to overthrow the final empire helping the common people who cleaned these steps? Thin and aging, Lord Renault wore a rich suit and a pair of aristocratic spectacles. A sparse gray mustache colored his lip, and despite his age, he didn't carry a cane for support. He nodded respectfully to Kelsier, but maintained a dignified air. Immediately, Vin was struck by one obvious fact.
This man knows what he's doing.
Kamen had been skilled at impersonating noblemen, but his self-importance had always struck Vin as a bit juvenile. While there were noblemen like Kamen, the more impressive ones were like this Lord Renault, calm and self-confident. Men whose nobility was in their bearing rather than their ability to speak scornfully to those around them. Vin had to resist cringing when the impostor's eyes fell on her. He seemed far too much a nobleman, and she had been trained to reflexively avoid their attention. The manor is looking much better. Yes, I am impressed with its progress. My cleaning crews are quite proficient. Give us a bit more time and the manor will be so grand that I wouldn't hesitate to host the Lord Ruler himself. Wouldn't that be an odd dinner party? This is the young lady I've spoke of. Renault studied her and Vin glanced away. She didn't like it when people looked at her that way, and made her wonder how they were going to try and use her. We will need to speak further of this, Kelsier, Renault said, nodding toward the mansion's entrance. The hour is late, but Late? Why, it's barely midnight. Have your people prepare some food. Lady Vin and I missed dinner. A missed meal was nothing new to Vin. However, Renault immediately waved to some servants and they leapt into motion. Renault walked into the building and Vin followed. In the entryway, she lingered, Sazed waiting patiently behind her. Kelsier turned back when he noticed that she wasn't following. Vin?
It's so clean.
Vin said, unable to think of any other description. On jobs, she'd occasionally seen the homes of noblemen, but those times had happened at night, in dark gloom. She was unprepared for the well-lit sight before her. The white marble floors of Mansion Renault seemed to glow, reflecting the light of a dozen lanterns. Everything was pristine. The walls were white, except where they had been wash-painted with traditional animal murals. A brilliant chandelier sparked above a double staircase, and the room's other decorations, crystal sculptures, vases set with bundles of aspen branches, glistened unmarred by soot, smudge, or fingerprints. Well, her reaction speaks highly of your efforts, he said to Lord Renault. So it's amazing how Kelsier had commented on how everything should be prettier. And I think to Clubs' shop, which has been made pristine, and I'm wondering if Kelsier specifically requested of Clubs that the place be cleaned, or if that's just something the two share in interest.
What's your opinion? I think Clubs, I feel like it fits with Clubs to want a clean place.
I agree.
It's just having standards that they for their own sake. It's not they're not keeping their place clean because noblemen are here and we need to make it clean. It's no, we deserve cleanliness just like any other kind of person.
Agreed. Vin allowed herself to be led into the building. The group turned right, entering a room whose whites were muted slightly by the addition of maroon furnishings and drapes. Perhaps the lady could enjoy some refreshment here for a moment. There's some matters of a delicate nature that I would discuss with you. Fine with me. Saz, why don't you keep Vin company while Lord Renault and I talk? Of course, Mr. Kelsier. Kelsier smiled, eyeing Vin, and somehow she knew that he was leaving Sazed behind to keep her from eavesdropping. She shot the departing men an annoyed look.
Oh, come on. Sorry, just before I say this, yeah, of course. Somehow she knows. Somehow she knows it's because he's trying to keep her from eavesdropping. No. It's like, no, of course. She's going to think the worst. And one of the things she does think is, what was that you said about trust, Kelsier?
Yeah, and I have so many feelings about this.
Okay.
Well, anyway, I don't know.
Tell me the feelings. Don't tell me you have them, and then don't tell me what they are.
Yeah, that would behoove me. But now I have to figure out how to articulate those feelings.
Daisy's taking liberties with this microphone, so
no,
you have time to think.
There was a touch of frustration with Vin in that moment because, just because you trust.
Yes.
Just because Kelsier says he trusts you doesn't mean that Renault necessarily trusts you yet. And Renault was the one that said that he needed a word. And it seems clear to me that he meant he wanted a word with Kelsier privately, which is fine. And just because you trust each other does not mean you get to know every single detail.
And it does, like you said, it doesn't mean that everyone else trusts you. Just because you got trust from one person, it doesn't mean that because Kelsier trusts her, that doesn't mean that, oh, well, now everyone's just going to trust her as much as Kelsier does. That's not how trust works. I understand she's very inexperienced with this.
Right.
And also just think about it. Let's think about it a bit more logically here. He doesn't want her to eavesdrop. Well, maybe it's because there's a whole bunch of servants that would be seeing her eavesdrop.
Right. And sometimes there are private things to discuss. Like some things are best left private. Could have been a personal issue. Could have been, hey, I was almost caught the other day. It could be, hey, I'm dying. Hey, it could be, hey, I used that ointment you told me about and it's really not going away. Can you help me out here?
Have a look here. Yeah.
So I appreciate where Vin is coming from, but you also have to extend a little bit of trust as well.
And I'm glad the way it is. I'm happy with the way it is dealt with later on by Kelsier.
Agreed. Very much so. Again, part
And
of why I found this
yeah.
chapter so masterful. Kelsier knows what
how
she's
how she
like.
he knows exactly. It's very easy to figure out what she's thinking because she is just so black and white in that way.
Yeah.
She's gonna think the worst. Don't worry.
She was even more annoyed at herself for getting unsettled. Why should she care if Kelsier excluded her? She had spent her entire life being ignored and dismissed. It had never bothered her before when other crew leaders had left her out of their planning sessions. Vin took a seat in one of the stiffly upholstered maroon chairs, tucked her feet up beneath her. She knew what the problem was. Kelsier had been showing her too much respect, making her feel too important. She was beginning to think that she deserved to be part of his secret confidences. Reen's laughter in the back of her mind discredited those thoughts. She sat, annoyed at both herself and Kelsier, feeling ashamed but not exactly certain why. So look,
oh God, it hurts.
I'm a little frustrated with Vin at this moment. This has been the first time that I got annoyed with the way she thinks. But I'm glad that she's self-reflective of it. But
she's feeling new things.
Yeah, and I totally get that. But cut Kelsier a little bit of slack.
Oh, she can't.
But no.
Yeah.
I know.
No, she can't because she's just no, I'm glad you're frustrated with her because that's literally how illogical it all is.
Yeah.
And how hard she has to fight against all of her instincts to become normal.
Yes.
And to see things clearly. She does not see them clearly because it's just
and it says she doesn't quite know why she's frustrated with herself, which suggests to me that she's not frustrated for having trusted Kelsier and feeling betrayed. I think it's that she's frustrated with herself because she knows she can trust Kelsier on some deep level. She knows that she's not necessarily upset at him for a good reason.
Yes, she does know that it's not for I think so. Yeah, you're right.
And so this is a growing moment for her.
Yeah, and also just the fact that you picked it up. I do think it is that she, even though she did say what was that about you said about trust, Kelsier, she that sort of ashamedness is or shamefulness is like it could also just touch on the fact that she knows she can trust him and she is being distrustful, but also trusting someone is valuing herself in a way, and she doesn't like that. Trusting herself makes her worthy. Trusting someone makes her worthy of trust. Feeling or thinking of herself as worthy of anything. Deserve. She uses the word deserve. She doesn't deserve anything in her mind. So she's very uncomfortable and ashamed of expecting anything.
Right. And it was certainly a very emotional reaction. I imagine it's like a child who has never had a toy before, and then you go and you give this child a brand new toy that they love it. You tell them it's theirs, and then you take it away. I imagine that like the irrational side of her it felt very much like that. And then the rational side comes in, says, wait a second, hold on.
I think it's very well written. The characterness of it, the humanity of it all. Oh, very good.
Yes. And the fact that I got frustrated, I think, shows that it's very human and I care about her. Well done. Well done. Renault's servants brought her a platter of fruits and breads. They set up a small stand beside her chair and even gave her a crystalline cup filled with a glistening red liquid. She couldn't tell if it was wine or juice, and she didn't intend to find out. She did, however, pick at the food. Her instincts wouldn't let her pass up a free meal, even if it was prepared by unfamiliar hands. Interesting, because she seemed to take the barley wraps without much
well, they were
thought.
Familiar enough.
I
suppose
That's fair. So Zed walked over and took a position standing behind her chair to the right. He waited with a stiff posture, hands clasped in front of him, eyes forward. The stance was obviously intended to be respectful, but his looming posture didn't help her mood any. Vin tried to focus on her surroundings, but this only reminded her of how rich the furnishings were. She was uncomfortable amid such finery. She felt as if she stood out like a black spot on a clean rug. She didn't eat the breads for fear that she would drop crumbs on the floor, and she worried about her feet and legs, which had been stained with ash while walking through the countryside, marring the furnishings.
All of this cleanliness came at some scar's expense. Why should I worry about disturbing it?
But she had trouble feeling outraged, for she knew that this was only a front. Lord Renaud had to maintain a certain level of finery. It would be suspicious to do otherwise. In addition, something else kept her from resenting the waste. The servants were happy. They went about their duties with a business-like professionalism, no sense of drudgery about their efforts. She heard laughter in the outer hallway. These were not mistreated ska. Whether they had been included in Kelsier's plans or not was irrelevant. So, Vin sat and forced herself to eat fruit, yawning occasionally. It was turning out to be a long night indeed. The servants eventually left her alone, though Sazed continued to loom behind her.
I can't eat like this.
She finally thought with frustration.
Sorry. Could you not stand over my shoulder like that?
Sazed nodded. He took 2 steps forward so that he stood next to her chair rather than behind it. He adopted the same stiff posture, looming above her exactly as he had before. Vin frowned in annoyance, then noticed the smile on Sazed's lips. He glanced down at her, eyes twinkling at his joke, then walked over and seated himself in the chair beside her.
I've never known a terraceman with a sense of humor before.
I was under the impression that you hadn't known any terracemen at all, Mistress Vin.
Well, I've never heard of one with a sense of humor. You're supposed to be completely rigid and formal.
It's simply that we're subtle, Mistress, Sazed said, though he sat with a stiff posture. There was still something relaxed about him. It was as if he were as comfortable when sitting properly as other people were when lounging. That little joke of his endeared me to Sazed quite a bit.
I really loved it. Yeah, I love the interaction between the two of them. He's playing with her, and I like that she just takes it as a joke. He's not harassing her. He's not being cruel. He's just making a joke.
Agreed. Yes.
Mm-mm.
Okay, so she thinks to herself,
that's how they're supposed to be. The perfect serving men, completely loyal to the final empire.
Is something troubling you, Mistress Vin?
How much does he know? Perhaps he doesn't even realize that Renew is an imposter. I was just wondering how you came here.
You mean, how did a terraceman steward end up as part of a rebellion, intending to overthrow the final empire? Sazed asked in his soft voice. Vin flushed. Apparently he was well-versed indeed. That is an intriguing question, Mistress. Certainly my situation is not common. I would say that I arrived at it because of belief.
Belief?
Yes. Tell me, Mistress, what is it that you believe?
What kind of question is that?
The most important kind, I think. Vin sat for a moment, but he obviously expected a reply, so she finally shrugged.
I don't know.
People often say that, but I find that it is rarely true. Do you believe in the final empire?
I believe that it is strong.
Immortal?
It has been so far.
And the Lord Ruler? Is he the ascended avatar of God? Do you believe that he, as the ministry teaches, is a sliver of infinity?
I've never thought about it before.
Perhaps you should. If, upon examination, you find that the ministry's teachings do not suit you, then I would be pleased to offer you an alternative.
What alternative?
That depends. The right belief is like a good cloak, I think. If it fits you well, it keeps you warm and safe. The wrong fit, however, can suffocate. Vin frowned slightly at that, but Sazed only smiled. Eventually, she turned her attention back to her meal. After a short wait, the side door opened, and Kelsier and Renaud returned. Now, Renaud said as he and Kelsier seated themselves, a group of servants bringing another plate of food for Kelsier. Let us discuss this, child. The man you are going to have play my hair will not do, you say? Unfortunately, Kelsier said, making quick work of his food. That complicates things greatly. We'll just have Vin be your heir. A girl her age could inherit, but it would be suspicious for me to pick her. There are any number of legitimate male cousins in the Renaud line who would be far more suitable choices. It was going to be difficult enough to get a middle-aged man past courtly scrutiny. A young girl. No. Too many people would investigate her background. Our forged family lines will survive passing scrutiny, but if someone were to actually send messengers to search out her holdings... Besides, there is another issue. If I were to name a young unmarried girl as my heir, hers would instantly become one of the most sought-after hands in Luthadel. It would be very difficult for her to spy if she were to receive that much attention. Vin flushed at the thought. Surprisingly, she found her heart sinking as the old impostor spoke.
This was the only part Kelsier gave me in the plan. If I can't do it, what good am I to the crew?
So what do you suggest? Well, she doesn't have to be my heir. What if instead she were simply a young scion I brought with me to Luthadel? Perhaps I promised her parents, distant but favored cousins, that I would introduce their daughter to the court. Everyone would assume that my ulterior motive is to marry her off to a high noble family, thereby gaining myself another connection to those in power. However, she wouldn't draw much attention. She would be of low status, not to mention somewhat rural. Which would explain why she's a bit less refined than other court members. No offense, Vin. Vin looked up from hiding a piece of napkin-wrapped bread in her shirt pocket.
Why would I be offended?
Never mind. Vin's so funny.
Vin is... it's you know what, and there's this cinematic sort of moments, the visual of you get this view of Vin just what? She's stuffing some food in her pockets because she's just so strange.
Yeah. And it's another, not just a cinematic moment, it's another one of those, like, I really wish this were a cartoon moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Please make an anime. Don't make a live action.
Yes. Please. Yes. This will work much better. Everyone assumes that House Renault will eventually join the high nobility, so they'll accept Vin into their ranks out of courtesy. But she herself will be unimportant enough that most people will ignore her. That is the ideal situation for what we will want her to do. I like it. Few people expect a man of your age in mercantile concerns to bother himself with balls and parties, but having a young socialite to send instead of a rejection note will serve as an advantage to your reputation. Indeed. She'll need some refinement, however, and not just in appearance. Vin squirmed a bit beneath their scrutiny. It looked as if her part in the plan would go forward, and she suddenly realized what that meant. Being around Renault made her uncomfortable, and he was a fake nobleman. How would she react to an entire room full of real ones? I'm afraid I'll have to borrow Sazed from you for a while. Quite all right. He's really not my steward, but yours. Actually, I don't think he's anybody's steward anymore, eh, Saz? A terraceman without a master is like a soldier with no weapon. Mr. Kelsier, I have enjoyed my time attending to Lord Renault, as I am certain that I shall enjoy returning to your service. Oh, you won't be returning to my service? Sazed raised a questioning eyebrow. Kelsier nodded toward Vin. Renault is right, Saz. Vin needs some coaching, and I know plenty of high noblemen who are less refined than you. Do you think you could help the girl prepare? I am certain that I could offer the young lady some aid. Good, Kelsier said, popping one last cake in his mouth and rising. I'm glad that's settled, because I'm starting to feel tired, and poor Vin looks like she's about to nod off in the middle of her fruit plate.
I'm fine.
Vin said immediately, the assertion weakened slightly by a stifled yawn. Aw, poor thing, she's so young and tired. Sazed, would you show them to the appropriate guest chambers? Of course, Mester Renault. Vin and Kelsier trailed the tall terraceman from the room as a group of servants took away the remnants of the meal.
I left food behind.
Vin noticed, feeling a bit drowsy. She wasn't certain what to think of that occurrence. As they crested the stairs and turned into a side hallway, Kelsier fell into place beside Vin. I'm sorry for excluding you back there, Vin.
There's no reason for me to know all of your plans.
Nonsense. Your decision tonight makes you as much a part of this team as anyone else. Renault's words in private, however, were of a personal nature. He is a marvelous actor, but he feels quite uncomfortable with people knowing the specifics of how he took Lord Renault's place. I promise you, nothing we discussed has any bearing on your part in the plan.
I believe you.
Good, Kelsier said with a smile, clapping her on the shoulder. Saws, I know my way to the men's guest quarters. I was, after all, the one who bought this place. I can make my way from here. Very well, Master Kelsier, Sazed said with a respectful nod. Kelsier shot Vin a smile, then turned down a hallway, walking with his characteristically lively step. Vin watched him go, then followed Sazed down a different side passage, pondering the allomancy training, her discussion with Kelsier in the carriage, and finally Kelsier's promise a few moments ago. The 3,000 boxings, a fortune in coins, was a strange weight tied to her belt. Eventually, Sazed opened a particular door for her, walking in to light the lanterns. The linens are fresh, and I will send maids to prepare you a bath in the morning. Will you require anything else? Vin shook her head. Sazed smiled, bade her good evening, then walked back out into the hallway. Vin stood quietly for a short moment, studying the room. Then she turned, glancing once again in the direction Kelsier had gone.
Sazed?
Yes, Mistress Vin?
Kelsier. He's a good man, isn't he?
A very good man, Mistress. One of the best I've known.
A good man. I don't think I've ever known one of those before.
Sazed smiled, then bowed his head respectfully and turned to leave. Vin let the door swing shut. The end of part 1. Oh, like I said, for the 100th time, masterful.
Yes, such good. Like we got a little bit of action in the beginning, right? But so much character work that was still very exciting and engaging. You didn't need them to carry on with a lot of intense training in this chapter. That conversation came at the perfect time. It was really, and his response afterwards, of knowing what to say to her, what she's thinking, and like it's hard for her and the first thing she thinks actually after this little interaction with Kelsier, where he says you're supposed to, nonsense, your decision tonight, you're part of the team, all of that, and then that's followed by her thinking of Kelsier as a good man. It's like, wow.
Yes.
Oh yes, she's absorbing it.
It is so rare for characters to be excellent communicators, and it really feels like this whole chapter was just nothing but excellent communication.
Especially, but without making, but it's realistic. Like what she needs from the communication is very believable, and Kelsier's perceptiveness is also very believable. It's all believable, so that makes it brilliant.
Yeah, at no point did it feel like Brandon Sanderson putting words in the character's mouth because he felt that that's what the other character needs to hear. It very much felt like in character, commenting on their genuine observations and it having a meaningful effect on the other.
Yeah, loved it. What do we think about Lord Renew? How this happened? What thoughts do you have about how he was taken over?
I honestly don't have much of a clue anymore. I mean, it could be connected to one of the two metals that we don't know about. I suspect it's not the atium. It could be the other unknown one, but I suspect that if the ability to change faces were common, I rephrase, commonly known, even if the metal to do so weren't common, there would be measures put in place to prevent what Kelsier has done. So I'm thinking maybe not one of the two metals because of that. So I think it's fair to say that this is not a Mistwraith from what we learned about them earlier in the chapter.
Yeah, and this is not some kind of Mistwraith. It's really unlikely that this is like a grown one.
Right.
This is a person. This is we see that it's a very far stretch for say a grown Mistwraith to be as intelligent as a person.
Yes, and given that Kelsier said in a previous chapter that this man looks exactly like Lord Renault, I can't imagine that they have the surgical prowess to make that happen.
So there could be a magical explanation. There could be a practical one, a practical magic one. Yeah.
Yeah. But
We will. Maybe we'll find out.
I hope we do.
Maybe he isn't actually. He is Lord Renault. But no, I don't know.
Like
Look,
a soul swap type situation.
like he is actually a nobleman that is interested in this car, but no, everybody else knows that it's not him. So
Yeah, and
he is an imposter for real. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there was that interaction where Kelsier more or less explicitly said that it's not Lord Renault, or not really.
Yeah, and he bought the mansion and all of that. They've made this front. They've turned all of this around for him. If this was the real Lord Renault, this sort of thing wouldn't really need to be done. So yeah, I did consider it, but yeah, no, I don't believe. I tested it out. It failed. No. One more thing, just about the magic system. It's a little bit further back, but don't burn metals that aren't part of the 10 basic ones. Or like that makes me think that there is some possible, sometimes or in some way, you could discover a new power. I don't know, but it's very dangerous. So.
Well, we certainly do know that Kelsier has the porcelain metal, and he doesn't know what it does. And yeah, there's clearly a damn good reason why he hasn't just like chipped off a little bit, tried it, because it could be dangerous.
Yeah.
Like, how would you control for that? Like, would you go out into the middle of like an empty plane and like
it's a wild card.
Experiment? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's all of a sudden you just it's a teleporting metal. Okay, now what? It's taken me to another dimension. Okay.
Yep.
You don't know. So yeah, it's a huge risk. But I like that it's sort of open ended, but there is risk.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Oh, well,
Good
is there
chapter.
anything else? Yes. So good.
No, I'm excited. And it's the end of part 1. The next part is called Rebels Beneath a Sky of Ash. Join us for that.
If you haven't done so, would you kindly go and subscribe to ThatDarnKitteh, where she has wonderful panel shows on Thursdays with a group called The Thinkers, and she bounces between.
That features Dorkus.
I'm there sometimes. I say funny things on occasion. It's true. It's very true. And usually Tuesdays, but occasionally on Wednesdays, she will either do a diagram stream or a gaming stream where she plays Meowster Hunter, usually. So, worth a do.
Yes. And if you've come this far and you haven't subscribed or liked the video, why don't you do both of those things? What is wrong with you if you don't? You haven't. And join us for the next one. Subscribe, put on your notifications so that you get the next one. Do your reading. Join us again. Thank you.
Thanks
for joining us.
Yes, thank you so much. It is greatly appreciated. Have a good week. Bye.
Bye.